Alright, Gale, you're up. Fire, perhaps the greatest power mankind has ever harnessed. It can be used for heat, light, or burning your enemies alive. What heinous acts demand such brutal tactics, you may ask? Well, while most Americans think the answer is being a Vietnamese man, the real answer is far worse. Slavery. In the last Baldur's Gate 3 video, we followed the adventures of the warlock Livemai, a young tiefling man with kind eyes and a heart of gold, as he attempted to end racism by killing all other races. Succeeding in his goal and saving the tieflings, Livemai was free to continue his quest to remove the parasite in his brain, deciding to journey through the Underdark to reach the mages of Moonrise Tower. However, it was here in the depths of the Underdark that he encountered something far worse than racism. Slavery. Today, we'll be using every tool in Livemai's arsenal, including cutting people in half, harnessing the dark arts, and burning people to death with fireballs to end slavery once and for all. Will I succeed in navigating this strange and dangerous world of terrifying monstrosities, undead nightmares, and
Italians?
Free the slaves and get the girl? Or will the parasite in my brain, whispering gay thoughts, transform me into the very monster I'm fighting against? Only one way to know. Our story begins right where we left off, with Livemai, Gale, Shadowheart, and Karlach making their way into the Underdark. Upon arriving in the depths of the world, I found myself in the ruins of an ancient temple. I headed down the stairs and was immediately pulled into a cutscene by a flamboyantly homosexual man who materialized out of thin air. His name is Raphael, a devil from hell with an incredible affinity for talking. He dumped genuinely useless exposition on me for about 5 minutes while I sat there trying to figure out who this is, what he wants, and why I'm suddenly in some sort of manner. After a genuine age had passed, he finally got to the point. Apparently, he's offering to remove the parasite in my brain in exchange for my soul. Obviously, I said no. However, according to the Baldur's Gate 3 wiki, every one of these options results in the same dialogue response, meaning this entire interaction was a colossal waste of my time. I headed out of the ruined temple and made my way down a winding path, where I encountered what appeared to be your average Greek man. Understandably, Karlach immediately fell into a blind rage and tore the man limb from limb. She's so fucking hot. Not long after the encounter with the Greeks, I came across what appeared to be a community entirely made up of sentient mushrooms. They seemed like fun guys. So I headed into the colony to speak with their leader. I'm gonna be honest, this individual was quite unnerving. Between the corpse mutilation, the strange and bulbous body shape, and the deep husky voice,
Flesh talker.
It was like meeting every girl on Tinder all at once. From the Mushroom King, I learned that a colony of dwarves, a colony of the vertically challenged, led by a drow man, had slaughtered some of the mushroom people and enslaved a group of gnomes. Of course, I had to get involved and stop these injustices the only way I knew how, with acts of extreme violence. I left the mushroom village behind and headed towards some ruins on the shore of an underground river. As I entered the ruins, a dwarvish man suddenly materialized before me and scared the living shit out of me. Not because it was a jump scare or anything, but because I firmly believe men being shorter than 5'6" is extremely unnatural. Unfortunately for this man, he quickly found out why short kings call me Robespierre, because in just a few swings of my sword, his head started to roll. With the element of surprise at our backs, my party and I descended on the dwarves occupying these ruins. I used Misty Step to teleport next to the dwarves and quickly dispatch them. Karlach ran them down, while Gale and Shadowheart provided damage from a range. Before I knew it, it was down to just one dwarf left, who, in his infinite wisdom, abandoned all strategy and decided to leap at us from the top of the ruins. While he obviously died the next turn, I did find his extremely autistic decision-making heavily inspiring. With the dwarves dead, I made my way to the riverbed and commandeered their ship, using the vessel to head downriver towards the dwarven fortress. Upon arriving at the fortress, I found myself completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale and beauty of the architecture. Maybe some good can come from slavery, after all. I stepped off the boat and was immediately halted by some dwarves who demanded to know who I was and what I was doing there. While ordinarily I would have just killed them on the spot, I figured I should probably learn what I was getting myself into first, so I decided to fall back on another skill in my arsenal: gaslighting. Thanks to my 20 charisma, I was able to convince the dwarves that I too was a dwarf and just really self-conscious about my height. Deciding to take a look around, I made my way from the docks and quickly came to a small gathering of dwarves attempting to convince Patrick Mahomes and LeBron James to help them move a pile of boulders. Okay, I'm intrigued. After asking around, apparently these boulders were blocking the entrance to something called the adamantine forge. Sorry, slaves, you're gonna have to wait, cause that sounds cool as fuck. I offered to speak to the goats on behalf of the dwarves and succeeded in convincing them to remove the rubble in exchange for their freedom. Upon the rubble being cleared, however, the dwarves immediately drew their weapons and turned on me. Much like making a sudden movement around a cop, this was not a wise decision, as in addition to having now hit my level 5 power spike, I had just befriended the goats, who immediately introduced the dwarves to the concept of gravity. After the battle, if you could call it that, I was free to enter the newly unlocked passage. I headed inside and quickly came to a large bridge completely covered in fire traps. Now, at this point in my playthrough, it was 4 in the morning, and there were far too many traps for me to care. So instead of dealing with them intelligently, I opted to brute force my party through the traps using Shadowheart to heal any damage taken. Upon passing through the gauntlet of traps, I was rewarded with the entrance to the adamantine forge. The forge was breathtaking in scale, a massive circular structure powered by lava with a giant hydraulic press in the center. Fighting the urge to place my testicles in the hydraulic press, I walked over to this lever and pulled it, which lowered the whole structure down and primed the forge. Over here is a valve which is used to flood the forge with lava and heat it. This valve also has the secondary function of triggering the most aggravating boss fight in the game. Why is it aggravating, you may ask? Well, class, that's because I am severely mentally deficient. This is Grym, a massive clockwork golem that serves as the guardian of the forge, sporting a high HP pool, tough armor, and devastating AoE attacks. Upon turning the valve, Grym emerged from his pipe and the battle began. Initially, the fight was looking good. I did my best to keep Gale at a range, while Karlach and Livemai got in close, and Shadowheart standing just out of range to keep the whole party topped up. While Grym hits like a truck, I was confident I'd be able to pull off a victory. This confidence quickly dwindled when the gimmick for the boss fight kicked in. Notice how Grym is glowing orange? Yeah, I sure didn't, so when the glow faded and my attacks stopped doing any damage, I just assumed I'd been using the wrong damage type the entire time. Instead of using my brain, I decided to use every weapon at my disposal to try and break this immortal machine. I hit Grym with Livemai's sword, no damage. I changed weapon type, still no damage. I shoved Grym in a wood chipper. He's not made of wood. I made aggressively homosexual advances towards him. He reciprocated. Finally, after I felt like I'd exhausted every option, I headed over to the Baldur's Gate wiki. Yes, I see. I'm an idiot. See, at this point during the fight, the lava flooding the arena had dispersed, which leads to Grym cooling off and becoming impossible to damage. All you have to do is turn the valve again to keep the arena flooded with lava and Grym vulnerable. I flooded the forge with lava once more, and the fight with Grym continued. However, it was no walk in the park. At this point, Karlach and Livemai were taking turns going down, Shadowheart was doing everything in her power to keep them standing, and Gale walked into lava and died. Finally, Shadowheart landed the killing blow on Grym and brought this awful experience to a close. Now free to use the forge, I set about crafting Livemai a brand new adamantine sword and Karlach a a set of adamantine armor. Armed with both shiny new equipment and experience, I was ready to resume my primary goal of freeing the slaves. I headed back to the fortress and made my way to a grand hall where a large congregation of gnomish slaves were digging at some rubble. Using my telepathic abilities, I learned that there were survivors on the other side of the rubble trapped in a room filled with poisonous gas. The good news? I was able to use an explosive device to clear the rubble and free the survivors trapped inside. The bad news? Inhaling so much poisonous gas likely gave these men carcinoma. Inside the room was a gnomish slave and a drow man named Nier, leader of the dwarves and the one the Mushroom King warned me about. Upon being freed, Nier immediately walked up to the slaves, blamed them for his cancer diagnosis, and hurled one into the lava. Okay, pal, time to die. Gale.
It's wizard time! Fireball!
With Gale's fireball kicking things off, the fight to free the slaves began. Since Gale's fireball put the vast majority of my opponents on little to no health, finishing them off was no problem whatsoever. Livemai used Misty Step to teleport around the battlefield, Shadowheart used Spirit Guardians to slow roast anybody unfortunate enough to stand in her presence, and Karlach ran Nier down and ripped the man limb from limb. As the battle neared its conclusion, this final dwarf clearly had good survival instincts, as they cast invisibility on themselves in an attempt to escape. Unfortunately for them, I'm like a bloodhound when it comes to sniffing out potential burn victims. With my dwarvish genocide complete, I headed over to the leader of the now free gnomish slaves. He thanked me graciously for my efforts. However, just as I was about to take my leave, this cheeky fuck casually mentioned that another group of slaves were taken off-site to Moonrise Towers. Are you fucking serious? Ahem. Guess I gotta go free them too. This shit never ends. I said goodbye to the gnomes and made my way through the now desolate dwarven fortress to an elevator that would take me up to the shadow-cursed lands and on the path to Moonrise Tower. Much like Eastern Europe, the shadow-cursed lands are a dark and miserable place. As the name suggests, the shadow curse itself is the gimmick of these lands, causing your party to take damage over time if they ever leave the radius of a light source. I'll admit, it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure this gimmick out. Heading down the road, I quickly encountered what seemed to be a group of American citizens under siege by a horde of illegal immigrants. This encounter brings up so many questions. Why are the immigrants attacking? What do they want? Maybe the commander-in-chief can clear things up.
These people are coming into our country and they're taking black jobs and Hispanic jobs.
Not on my watch. I joined the battle, and between all of my weapons being magical, and Shadowheart using Turn Undead to instantly kill 3 of these undead immigrants, the encounter was over as quickly as it began. After the battle, the leader of this group introduced herself as Lysandra of the Harpers, and invited me to follow her to a nearby settlement. This settlement was a large inn, surrounded by a protective barrier that staves off the Shadow Curse. Great, they've gentrified my Shadow-cursed lands. I entered the barrier and was introduced by the Harpers to a woman named Jaheira. Apparently, asking her if I could speak to the man in charge was not the right course of action. Thankfully, a tiefling girl from the Grove ran over and vouched for me, letting Jaheira know that I was in fact the man that ended racism and cleared up this whole misunderstanding. Thanks, kid. From Jaheira, I learned that the drow I kept facing were all servants of a being called the Absolute, which currently resides in Moonrise Towers. Just a quick aside, but leaving this stupid fucking helmet on Shadowheart has been endlessly entertaining to me. According to Jaheira, there is an army amassing along the road to Baldur's Gate under the command of a man named General Ketheric Thorm. According to Jaheira, General Thorm is... and if I can find a way to remove his invulnerability, the Harpers will be free to launch an assault on the tower. Alright, looks like I have my mission. Intending to get some new equipment for my journey to Moonrise, I headed over to the blacksmith, where I encountered a familiar face. This man was originally a blacksmith from the Grove, and is seemingly capable of working on Karlach's infernal engine. To both Karlach's and my surprise, he was actually able to tweak Karlach's engine and cool it down, allowing Karlach and I to physically touch for the first time. If the ensuing over-the-mask makeout session was any indicator, my journey to Moonrise had just been put on a brief hold.
I'd like to take you to bed now.
Whoa! My eyes only! I guess you freaks can listen. Oh, Karlach, You have no idea how long I've been waiting for it. Why do you have a hammer?
Happy birthday, soldier.
A drill? Hold on. Whoa, 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 whoa. It definitely won't fit in that hole. A chainsaw? That was the best night of my life. Officially marking the beginning of Mommy is right. Officially marking the beginning of Mommy Karlak and I's relationship, a night like that was the perfect way to emotionally prepare me for my journey to Moonrise Tower. The road to Moonrise was actually rather boring, so I had to get creative in order to entertain myself. Along the way, I beat an Italian man to death, found out what happens when you shove 15 crows in a microwave, and gaslit a tax collector into killing themselves. Before I knew it, I'd made it to Moonrise Towers. Thanks to the parasite in my brain, the guards at the tower assumed I was an agent of the Absolute and let me inside. Entering the tower, I stepped into a grand hall where a large crowd of goblins and orcs had gathered in a cluster around a man sitting upon a throne. This man was General Thorm, and it seems he really was, as shortly upon entering the room, a goblin threw a javelin at his chest to no effect. Thorm was large, imposing, and I could tell by looking at him that under just one, maybe two layers of clothing, he had a penis. After this memorable introduction, I was approached by Zrel, Thorm's right-hand woman, who wanted mental proof that I was in fact loyal to the Absolute. In a panic, I started thinking of my ongoing jihad against the elderly, which seemed to do the trick in gaining her trust. Now that I had her trust, she wanted me to help a man named Balthazar retrieve a holy artifact for Thorm from a nearby temple. In order to better infiltrate this cult and learn the secret of Thorm's power, I decided to play along, agreeing to this quest and heading out immediately. The journey to the temple was largely uneventful, save for this one encounter with a horde of angry fishmen. Hello, angry fishmen. Goodbye, angry fishmen. I made my way to the entrance of the temple and wait, no, not again.
Through the dark, he went creeping.
I've
and
grown quite
awoke
fond
what
of
was
you,
sleeping
very
in
well.
my way. A new
There is a
grave.
creature
I
that
saw
I
it
don't
not
underestimate.
underestimate. Strike
Oh.
first. Strike the creature.
I made my way to the entrance of the temple and stepped inside, entering what seemed to be a mausoleum dedicated to General Thorm's family. After looking around, I found a secret passage that led me deeper into the mausoleum, revealing the structure to actually be a temple dedicated to Shar, Shadowheart's patron and the goddess of darkness and death. Stepping into the temple, I was immediately ambushed by a horde of undead, emerging out of several portals that had opened up around the room. To end the encounter and stop this endless tide, I had to run around the room, closing the portals by hitting them as hard as I could with a sword. That feels weird to me. With the portals closed and the undead dealt with, a door on the far side of the room slid open, revealing the hulking, lumbering form of your average Hungarian man. I tentatively stepped into the room and was greeted by a man absolutely covered in actively bleeding wounds. This is Balthazar, brother of the Hungarian man, necromancer, and devout follower of Thorm. Say what you will about General Thorm, he meets his diversity quota. According to Balthazar, the artifact responsible for Thorm's immortality exists deeper within the temple, but Shar has blocked the way forward behind a series of challenges. While he claims to not need my help, he seems very okay with letting me complete all the challenges instead of him. If it'll get me to the artifact first, you got it, pal. I left Balthazar behind and set out to complete Shar's challenges. The first challenge was a test of stealth. I had to sneak through this maze without being spotted by the maze's guards. Well, that doesn't sound too hard. Damn it. Fuck. Clearly, barging straight in was not a viable strategy. At least, not yet. See, Shadowheart actually has a skill in her arsenal called Pass Without a Trace that, when cast, gives all members of my party a whopping +10 to any stealth check, meaning each member of my party was effectively invisible. I waltzed right past the guards and completed the first trial with little to no issue. The second challenge was a little more complicated. See, this chamber was filled with evil skinwalkers that wanted to take the place of myself and my party members, while my doctor tried to convince me that these were schizophrenic hallucinations and were actually innocent children. I knew that the real challenge here was being able to identify a skinwalker when you see one and dispose of these evil duplicates as violently as possible. Challenge 2 complete. While the first two challenges were relatively easy, the third and final challenge was the single greatest hurdle of my entire campaign. For this challenge, I had to cross an invisible bridge to reach an artifact on the far side of this pit. Let me tell you, this was aggravating. By now, we all know that I am severely brain damaged, so no matter how many times I attempted this, my capacity to memorize the layout of the bridge was virtually zero. Again and again and again, I fell to my death, growing ever closer to a severe mental breakdown. Finally, I had an epiphany. What if I just ignored the bridge entirely? Thanks to Mommy Karlak's thunderous thighs, I was able to use her to leap from platform to platform without having to remember the layout. Hey guys, editing bongos here. I just realized the layout to this puzzle is on the floor at the entrance of the room. I'm going to crash into a homeless shelter at 300 miles an hour of this stupid fucking bridge and retrieve the artifact on the far side in one go. Challenge 3 complete. With the challenges complete, I was now able to gain access to the vault of the temple. To my surprise, instead of an artifact, I found an underwater portal to another world. I stepped inside and found myself in the strange realm of the Shadowfell, the land of the dead. I made my way down this incredibly long path till finally I came to a ritual circle where Balthazar, hang on, how did you get here before me?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Where Balthazar was doing some sort of ritual on a woman trapped in the circle. It turns out the artifact is not an artifact at all, but rather an angel bound to General Thorm, lending him her immortality. In other words, she was a slave. And we all know how I feel about slavery. Balthazar was accompanied by an absolute horde of undead. Thankfully, my boy Gale can always cast Fireball. That's fine, Shadowheart will get him back up, and then my boy Gale can... Okay, fine. The rest of us will handle this. Thankfully, Gale isn't the only one with AoE damage. Focusing on the boss, my party took turns kicking the living shit out of Balthazar until finally, Livemai scored the killing blow. And with his death, mopping up the remaining undead was no trouble whatsoever. After the battle, I learned the caged woman was called the Night Song, and after talking Shadowheart out of schizophrenically murdering her, she offered to aid me in my quest to kill General Thorm and free the other slaves. With her release, Thorm was now vulnerable. I headed back to Moonrise Towers and found Jaheira and the Harpers waiting for me outside the tower's walls. As I approached, Jaheira asked me what the plan was. I guess the man in charge was me all along. The plan was simple. The Harpers would deal with the enemy on the ground floor, while Jaheira and my party would ascend the tower and confront General Thorm. After a quick speech from Jaheira, the battle for Moonrise Towers began. We flooded into the tower and ascended the stairs, emerging out onto the rooftop to see the Night Song had already engaged General Thorm. Well, we can't let her have all the fun. Joining the fight, Livemai ran around the right flank, clearing out the undead soldiers in his path, while Jaheira and Shadowheart ran left. Karlach charged a necromancer in the middle, and the Night Song engaged General Thorm in single combat, which was not a wise decision. Yeah, you should probably leave that to Karlach. In just 2 rounds of combat, I'd already gotten Thorm to half HP. However, as my party closed in for the kill, Thorm received some help from an unlikely ally, a cutscene. Ripping its way out of the tower, a massive tentacle slammed into the Night Song, and then teleported General Thorm and the Night Song away. With not a minute to waste, my party and I took a quick 8-hour nap, then ran over to where the massive tentacle had ripped free of the tower and jumped down the hole. At the bottom of the pit, I found myself in a strange and alien underground structure. The writhing, flesh-covered walls and ever-lingering scent of rot were clear indicators to me that we'd just arrived in downtown Chicago. Creeping through the halls, I found General Thorm in the midst of a heated debate with who appeared to be Joker from Persona 5 and Billie Eilish. Suddenly, Joker raised his hand and summoned a massive floating brain wearing a crown. There it was, the Absolute in the flesh, an elder brain under the control of these 3 individuals who wished to use its power to enslave all of Baldur's Gate. In a flash, Joker, Billie Eilish, and the brain teleported away, and their army began to march. That was a lot, and really seems like future me's problem. Right now, I needed to focus on Thorm. I emerged from hiding and charged the general, looking to finish this fight once and for all. On the far side of the battlefield, I spotted the Night Song, trapped in another soul cage. I figured freeing her first was probably the smartest move, so I had Livemai teleport over and release her bonds. With the Night Song freed, my party charged at Thorm. With our combined might, we beat down General Thorm. And as Livemai closed in for the kill, Thorm received help from an unlikely ally, a cutscene, and I was powerless to watch as General Thorm fell backwards into acid? Oh, he's killing himself. Okay, cool. Wait, what? Excuse me? Yeah. I'm gonna die. It seems in death, General Thorm was reborn as the living avatar of the God of Death, Merkel. I am so fucked. Every swing of the God of Death's scythe did an astronomical amount of damage in an AoE, and merely being in the presence of this unholy being made my party members unable to be healed. So, in a last-ditch effort, I force-fed Karlach every strange and illegal substance at my disposal, and much like a drunk driver in a school zone, turned her into an unstoppable killing machine. Thanks to a few incredibly lucky hits, she blitzed through Merkel's incredibly high HP pool in just 2 turns, and allowed Livemai to land the killing blow. I am level 8, and I've just killed the God of Death. My DM is a functional idiot. With the Avatar's death, also came the death of General Thorm. After a very justifiable crash out from the Night Song, I made my way back up to Moonrise Tower, heading into the dungeons and freeing the gnomish slaves within. However, there was no cause for celebration. While Thorm was dead, and I'd succeeded in my goal of saving all current slaves, what about the future ones? The army marching on Baldur's Gate. It seemed quite clear to me that my task was far from over. I'd stopped the racists, I'd freed the slaves, I'd found love, and now it was time to save the world. Oh boy, this one took a long time to make. Surely part 3 won't take even longer. Before we go, I want to give a huge shout out to all my patrons. Remember to like, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Now, if you'll excuse me,